feel free to ask questions. Now we're talking about what happens in November. And it's pretty typical that November 1st is going to be when registration opens. In the September mailing, there is information about how to register, and there is a tag on the instruction page that includes this image to the left here. And then that should have that school's 4-digit ID number. So it's a unique code that we've assigned to your school. It should not typically change from year to year. Should be the same code, but that way only you can register your school. Again, if you are Cheney High School, for instance, and Cheney is bringing students on a Thursday or Friday for their freshmen, and then they're bringing students on Wednesday, they're going to have 2 separate IDs. The same thing applies that if there's a middle school in your district, right? Any school, any day is going to have a different ID. All we need in November, and we have this open until our registration payment date. All we need is a quantity of students. If you have the luxury of being able to, keep that a little bit higher, and you can afford the, $8 or $10 per student, we don't need names. So if you're still, verifying if they're going to read and all of that, you can figure that out later. This information needs to be entered on, it's sort of the registration, the registration page of our website. So our website is YSUEnglishFestival.org, but you see that /reg to register. This takes you to the database. So the other thing that might be a bit curious that I've seen some schools run into is that it's how we put your name in our system. So if we registered you as Youngstown East, for instance, as opposed to East, and you're looking for your school in the drop-down menu, you may need to look for the Y's compared to the E's. And there's a couple schools and districts that they've merged over the years, and maybe we left it under the old way. So, we can update any of that. So if there is a preferred name, let us know, and we can adjust the database. Okay, any questions on Angela, the getting in?
Thank you so much, because that was wonderful when you sent me the list, because you are right. When I was looking, I was like, I can't find things, but you did have everything. So that was awesome. But will I also, you'll be able to tell me, because I just found out today that two of the buildings are already registered, and I didn't know. So I think I could off this, I could ask you, email you, and you could verify some of the ones that have already registered. So I'm not double or tripling registering them.
Yes, and I think it's going to let you know that you've already registered if you try to go in and register. So I don't think you're going to mess anything up. You're not going to double book them. But yes, the info@YSUEnglishFestival.org email address actually goes to Ann, Michelle, Nikki, and myself. So and we all have access to the database, so we can kind of fastest fingers, right? Whoever's can get back to responding to you, hopefully.
That's no problem. I just have 14 schools, so I know 2 I think have registered that I just found out. So I think we'll be good.
Yes, and so some schools have been contacting us like, hey, we already registered and we need to up that number, but they don't want to, or perhaps can't go back in and change it. That's fine. We'll square it away with what the check is for whenever we receive that. And let me talk to you about then that next step. So this week, the 16th and 17th, we have been on a bit of a hiatus because of the pandemic. So we are returning to an in-person pickup. This is going to be in DeBartolo Hall on the campus of YSU on the 2nd floor of that building, which is the English and World Languages Department offices. There's a department conference room on that 2nd floor there. So when you come up the stairs or come off the elevators, we're the main office on that floor. And then Ann, Michelle, Nikki, or perhaps even myself will make an appearance. And in that window of time from 2:30 to 5 p.m., people just need to stop by and get their stuff. It's not it is not like a hour and a half long or 2.5 hours, excuse me, lecture or anything like that. It's just drop off and pick up. So we do accept checks made out to Youngstown State University. We will work with any school in the situation where the check cannot be provided as something that they're allowed to take, and it needs to be as a purchase order. That's fine. We'll work with you. Or if the check has to be mailed in and it's not allowed to be given to an employee like that, also fine. Again, there are some districts where the individual students are writing checks and they just have, rather than combining that into a check, they just give us separate checks. We don't prefer that, obviously, but we will work with that. If people bring cash, we will work with the cash and write you a receipt for that. When you do the registration process, based on the numbers that you entered there, it's going to be based on $8 per student. So people who are from an out-of-district school need to change that to be $10 per student. Or if you make any adjustments, so after you do your registration, you're like, Bobby got back to me and he's coming, and you need to up that. Just make the corrections on the invoice, pay the appropriate amount, and that will be fine. From that point, though, once we receive that check by this deadline of November 17th, and that's the same deadline for in-district or out-of-district, it's non-refundable, right? So for global pandemics, non-refundable. Somebody gets sick, they have a track meet, just always non-refundable. The festival actually costs a lot more than like I said, the $8 or $10 per person to put on. So that just goes to support the festival, and bringing in, quality authors, making sure we have quality material, good presentations, et cetera. There is a note that parking on campus costs $5. So if you do, if you need to carpool with somebody who's got a parking pass, I certainly encourage it. There's not really, there might be some brief parking meters.
There's parking on Armed Forces Boulevard
Yeah.
behind Kilcawley, and that's what I would use when I was a contact person. So if you go back there, there are meters, and since you're just running into the Bartolo and back out, I think you can feed the meter for up to like a half an hour. So that would be my recommendation. Instead of paying the $5, it's relatively cheap to feed the meter. There's also metered parking along Fifth Avenue in front of Crest. And generally by that time of day, it's relatively empty. So you could park there and then just walk up the hill to DeBartolo. So there are a couple of choices for metered parking along kind of the outskirts of campus, but still on campus.
Just remember the deck is gone that was beside DeBartolo, and that there are a bunch of construction vehicles at random times everywhere. They haven't been keeping the one across from McDonald's, in between McDonald's and Taco Bell, really open, but there are also lots behind those that you may possibly not have to pay to park in.
I also wanted to say something really quickly about payment, coming from the perspective of somebody who messed this up when I was a new contact person. So this is a good note for new contact people. Your treasurer is most likely not going to want to issue you a check the same day that you are going to pick up your materials. I did not know this my first year because in my mind, you're just writing me a check and signing it. That's actually not how it works. So just a word of caution to people who are new at doing this. I had never advised or been in charge of anything that required money like that. So make sure that your treasurer has the information ahead of time so that you can get your check well in advance of when you actually need it. So just a little word of caution that if you register your students the day before you go and pick up your materials, I can almost guarantee that your treasurer will not give you a check. They might, but they will not be happy with you. Trust me, I know. So just a little word of caution there.
Right.
Jackie,
So
I understand completely. I just got the information that I was in charge of this, so I'm already going to be telling you guys that we will be mailing the information, like mailing the check, because I was the grant person last year, so I know exactly what you mean, Jackie. It takes a while to process and get a PO, so I agree with you. So just to let you guys know, when you see me, don't kill me, because I'll be picking up the materials and saying that we're mailing the check.
and that's perfectly fine because it's more important to us that you get the materials, that you get the students excited about the festival, that they, can start reading as soon as possible if they haven't already, right? So we're more interested in that because that's the idea of why we want the in-person meet, is that we're giving enough bookmarks for every single student, enough pre-festival activities forms for every single student. So we want, right, in some schools where that's 30, 35, that's costly to mail. So, I mean, you're helping us out a lot. Plus, I mean, you get to meet Nikki, you get to meet Ann Michelle. They're going to be your go-to people if you need anything during the festival. If you've got other questions about how to do anything, like that's you get to have a person in front of you, you can ask at that point too.
One of the things I do to help sort of game the system is I usually put in my PO early to mid-October with a guesstimate of the number of kids and a guesstimate in terms of the amount. My treasurer has always said, as long as it's over what you probably will spend. And then once I do the registration forms online, I bring it up and say, this is what the amount needs to be. And then she's much more willing to cut me a check within 2 weeks. So because she got the PO months ago. So that's what I have done just on the regular, is usually beginning of October, I put in the PO so that I know that I can get a check for the exact amount. And then I just make a note. This will not be the exact amount. Invoice will be provided, once kids are registered.
All right, fantastic. So I mentioned that these are some of the things that you're going to be picking up. And so for contacts, distributing the bookmark and the trifold and the quadfold, like we are very sad to hear when, flyers that have useful information like end up in a teacher's drawer for months at a time. So this is just a reminder that they get to the right students. But here's I think this is super right important. And Amanda, I think that, this will be interesting information and make sure you take back to your schools. That once a school is registered, so that's even if one student is registered officially and coming to the festival, that entire school building then has the ability for any students who are in grades 7 through 12 in that building. So if it's a middle school, right, up until 8th grade probably. But if it's a high school, right, they're 10 through 12th grade students. If they're only registered for Wednesday, or if they're registered for Wednesday and Thursday or Friday, then all of the building, right, all of the students can compete in our pre-festival contests. So that's where okay, so we can have, about 1,000 students a day on campus, but, I would love to see, 10,000 students in our community right to these contests. I mean, Jackie and Ann Michelle and Nikki and I might have some heart attacks when we have to read so many essays, but we'll figure that out. That would be a fantastic problem to have. So the nice thing too about our pre-festival contests, I'll talk about those a little bit in a minute, is that typically for these, you only have to read one of the books, maybe two, to be able to compete. You do not have to read all 7 of the books, and you do not have to actually attend the festival in order then to enter these contests in advance. Okay, so about those contests, briefly, you're going to receive some individual flyers about the Jeremy Salvner Memorial Music Contest, in which students compose music inspired by one of the books. So I would also either give that copy or make a copy and give that to the music teacher. If there are multiple music teachers, make sure everyone gets a copy. I usually make sure to take some copies to my son's music teacher, for instance, who's does private lessons, because that's more likely where you're going to get to students who know how to compose music or who are interested in doing that. Students also for the Jeremy Salvner Memorial Music Contest can partner with another student. So again, as long as it's within that 7th through 9th grade range or within that 10th through 12th grade range, it could even be 2 students from different schools could partner. We do not want like, music teachers helping students on the composition or helping to perform on their recordings of the music. But we do want them to inspire them to participate and, take a chance, write some lyrics, compose some music. So similarly, there's a festival art contest. There's also a graphic essay contest. And I would suggest giving both of those copies to whoever the art teacher is for the relevant buildings, and encourage, right? Because a student may be interested in, for the art, it's inspiring students to, make a 2-dimensional piece of artwork that represents the book somehow, like a scene, or could be used as like maybe the cover of a book. And the graphic essay is just that. It's meant to be in like comic book style, right, where there's panels and text included, whether those are dialogue like pop bubbles or some additional explanation underneath in text. But I think that, again, for the graphic essay, you could partner an illustrator with a writer, and they could submit that as one entry, and that counts as the one entry for each of those students. So it'd be great if we got some artists included in that too. And I think technically this year you may not even have to have read the book that inspires the graphic essay contest this year. And Anne Michelle, since you're our resident artist here, do you have any other suggestions, kind of briefly on the art contest?
Not really suggestions, just I think so that most of the art students or the art teachers have the information is most important, so that any student that feels they want to participate can. And it doesn't really matter what medium they choose, if they want to paint or they want to do charcoal, black and white. All of those things are various interpretations that any student can choose to do. So there aren't really a lot of hard and fast rules. I think most of the parameters have to do with the size of the piece, and we don't accept 3-dimensional pieces. So your sculptors have to try to pare it down and make something 2-dimensional. But other than that, I think it's pretty much a wide open contest, and they can be as creative as they like.
Okay. And then I'm going to talk about the Candace Gay Memorial Essay Contest, but note that all of these contests, before I switch to the next page, are due February 24th, 2023. Typically every year it's going to be like that last Friday of February. They should be mailed. They can also be dropped off to the department. They could just be postmarked. And 2 of our contests, the Candace Gay Essay Contest and that's not the right direction there, Angela. And the Jeremy Salvner will have online submission opportunities as well. All of these contests have a separate category for junior high and senior high. We do books, pins, t-shirts, notebooks, monetary prizes, and we also choose up to the top 3 places to be recognized in our Festival of Writing. So the students who win may also be published as well. So we encourage, again, lots of participation from the schools.
Angela, just a quick suggestion for any new teachers out there. The trifold that the kids get at the beginning, they tend to lose them. And then when it comes time to sign up for tracks in the spring, like many months after they saw that trifold, they don't remember what Insights is or what Not So Trivial Pursuit is, especially with 7th and 8th graders. So I tend to tuck one of those trifolds into my folder and use it and photocopy it and give them a new one, a photocopied version of it in the spring, so that then when they go to choose tracks and look at the opportunities on the tracks, that they can see the description of what they are. Instead of me trying to explain what each of those sessions are, they can just read about them and then pick.
No, that's a great
Sometimes
suggestion.
I don't save it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to pause here for a second.